Hello to the humbled hopefuls of the world, the sincere seekers out there, and to all those who are still becoming. If you are finding yourself stuck somewhere in life, in love, or even in yourself, it might be because you're stuck in the wrong conversation.
In the wrong conversations, we ask the wrong questions, we seek out the wrong answers, we focus in on the wrong details, and we fight the wrong fights. And therefore, we spend a great deal of our energy and our life missing the deeper points.
We come together here each week to ask the big questions of life, not to suggest answers, but to deepen the process we use to find answers. Hello and welcome to The Wrong Conversation. This is where we humbly begin our journey, the first of hopefully 10,000 steps. So thank you for joining us on our maiden voyage, for our mutual inauguration, and for the soon-to-be fashionably vintage Episode 1. I am David Peters, and I am but one of your hosts. For joining me is my dear friend, fellow father, fellow husband, fellow creator, and fellow personal coach, and all-around nifty guy, Adrien Fiorucci.
That's right.
I'm coming to you from the heart of La La Land on the West Coast, and Adrien is coming to you from a maple forest sanctuary in the Northeast. And we've come together here to share a candid cross-coast conversation on what we like to call the wrong conversation.
Which we've had many times before.
Which we are well practiced in.
That's right, exactly. That's why we felt like we had the authority to talk about it, because it's something we've done a lot. So I'm excited, David. This is very exciting.
Yeah, this is it's funny. We've been having conversations like this for decades, but the idea to do it in this way came up pretty fast, and we're here pretty fast.
We are. And the wrong conversation seemed to be the right way to start somehow, right? Coming up with that name just seemed like a good launching place. Tell us why, David. Tell me why. Why is the wrong conversation the right conversation for us to be having?
Well, the first thing I think about when I think about the wrong conversation is that I know that most of the issues I've had in my life aren't because I didn't have the answer to the problem. It was because I was having the wrong conversation. So I couldn't even arrive at an answer, right? Or the answers I arrived at were the wrong answers. And so the main thing that comes to mind whenever I think about this is the famous Einstein quote that says we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we use to create them.
Yep, exactly.
And to me, that is like exactly right, because if you think about it, the conversations that we have, they kind of set the boundaries for how we're thinking, right? And how you think matters, right? How you're thinking matters.
You know, one of the other things that I was thinking about, because just to say it for the listener/watcher. David and I are really trying hard. Like, we have not talked about these subjects at all, so we want this to be as spontaneous as it possibly can be, just to see what comes up. And I think there's a lot more. It'll be a lot more interesting that way. And one of the first things that I thought about, as you were saying that too, is the fact that conversation is central to that whole thing. And what I mean by that, to me, what it means to me when I say that is that there's all kinds of conversations, right? And I think we'll probably be focusing in on, probably one. Like, if in my thing that I work on and try to share with people, it's going to be that one conversation that you're having in your head. How are we thinking? How is this conversation going on? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, how are we thinking? Because how we think has consequences.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
The questions you're trying to answer have consequences, and the answers you think you're in search of have consequences.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly the point. Yeah, I remember when I was trying to teach my kids some of these things in a very light-handed way, and whenever I've worked with kids a little bit, it's one of the things I'll often do. I have a picture where there's all kinds of stuff going on in the picture. There's kids, some kids are crying, some kids are laughing. It's like usually like a playground or something, and there's all kinds of things going on. And I'll say, okay, so you got 3 seconds. I want you to count how many unhappy kids you see. And you give them this. How many? Well, I saw 3. Okay, how many happy kids did you see? I didn't see any, right? Because they just such a visceral way for them to understand what you were focusing on is what you were seeing, right? It's kind of a trick question, but it always lands. It's fun to watch that, right? They always get it right away. It's like, oh yeah, I can see that now, right? It's like that too.
It's brilliant with the kids. That's a great way to do it. There was a real famous study, and I forget all the details of the study besides kind of what they did, but they showed people a video of a bunch of people playing basketball, and they said, how many times does the team in the black uniforms pass the ball or something? And so the people are counting the balls, and then at the end they asked everyone, and everyone has their answer, and everyone's approximately right. And then the researcher says, did you see the big gorilla? And people were like, what? It's like, did you see the gorilla walk across the court? And everyone's like, no, I didn't see it. And if they roll the tape back, and there's a guy in a big gorilla outfit walking across the screen, and no one noticed it because they're counting the passes of the ball. And so that's a kind of a well-known study at this point, but it just makes the point, and so ridiculously, how could you miss the gorilla? Exactly. But we all miss the gorilla.
Yeah,
and so where you're focused really matters, but the conversation determines where you're focused. So the wrong conversation has real consequences.
There are consequences, and like you said, in the intro or in the thing we've worked on writing, it's not even about always coming up with the right conversation or the right answers, but it's good to question or look. Right? Like, what is this conversation we're having? I think that's a big thing. Like, I'm big in questions. Like, inquiry would be the spiritual term for it, right? Sure. And it's not that you're looking for the answer all the time. It's that you're willing to sit in that uncomfortable place of questioning, right? Like, I think that's such a powerful thing. And that's, I think, something that we're going to be coming back to time and time again, too, as we start to go into different conversations and why this might be wrong or what is right in a way. It's not even about right and wrong so much as it is to be willing to look, to be willing to question, to open yourself.
I think that, and this is something I learned through doing coaching, right? So you and I both do personal coaching with people, and one of the things that you think when you start coaching or when you have the idea that I'm going to coach or I'm going to help somebody with a problem is that you're trying to help them solve their problem. And so your instinct is to coach the problem, right?
Yep.
And try to solve their problem for them and then give them some great advice and be a hero. But you very quickly realize when you're speaking with people that you don't have any better answers than anyone else, and you don't even have all the information they have. And their reporting of the information isn't going to be fully accurate. So what good are you anyway? You don't have all the variables to do all the impossible math. Yeah, and so very quickly when you're coaching, you realize that your job as a coach is not to know more than the other person or to be better at life than the other person. You're there to simply facilitate a conversation. Right. And hopefully the best conversation you can manage to facilitate.
Yeah. And a different conversation. You've said that many times too, right? Because so many times it's not about us having answers. It's about just helping them see the answers they already know, but they're somehow missing or they don't want to look at. There's a million different reasons.
Because their focus is in the wrong place. Yeah, because they're not looking at what they already know. Or they're avoiding looking at what they already know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so, and it's always fun. This is something we just talked about so many times. It's always fun to see that person have that aha moment. And that aha moment only happens because in some weird way they already knew.
Yes.
I truly believe that, right?
Always.
Otherwise it would be Chinese. That's what I said. Yeah. Like if you didn't already know this somewhere inside, I would be speaking Chinese to you. You wouldn't even get it at all. Right?
Anytime I've had a successful call with somebody, or a successful meeting with somebody, like they might come and present you like some sort of either or. I can't decide. Yeah. Either or.
Yeah.
Right? Which one? Help me pros and cons list this out. Right? and I can do that, but by the end, they still arrive in the same conclusion because they're still looking at the same list they've been looking at without me.
Exactly.
So I'm no good. I mean, I do have coaching tools that are like special pros and cons lists that help shift perspective a little bit, but I found that it's usually more effective to avoid, just to literally shift the conversation to be something different.
And this is the value of wrong conversations. So you just make me think of that immediately. They have a purpose.
Yes.
Oh, it's wrong. Or I tried that and it was right for a while. This is the point about it being, if it's too long, it's almost always inevitably going to be wrong because things have changed, right? But it was right for a while and now it's wrong. And there's value in that, seeing that, right? There's value in the wrong conversations. We just have to move on from them.
A lot of people won't know that something
right?
will be wrong. You don't know what's wrong, or maybe it feels like a culmination of 25 things.
right.
And so, I mean, this happens in marriage a lot, because you spend so much time with the person and you're so much of what they do is involved in what you do, and you're so intertwined that it could be any one of 25 things that happened that day that annoyed you and you don't know, and so you just feel like something's wrong, and so you just start saying something to your partner. You did this, you said that, you're this way or that. And you have to have, and that's the wrong conversation, probably because maybe it's none of those things, right? And so if you get stuck on any one of those subjects, which a lot of fights do get stuck on one of those subjects, but they're not.
Sure.
Usually
the same ones, right?
But a lot of times the real fight is not even about that. But you can't get to what it's really about until you get all of the other stuff out of you. Like, you have to exercise it, Right? You have to say it.
Exactly. Right. Which is the wrong conversation in a way, but it needed to be said, right?
And that's a counterintuitive thing, but you can't reach there until you
It is counterintuitive.
Just until you have a better conversation, right? Until you figure out how to have a better conversation, which is what we're doing here, which is our point, which is
exactly.
Trying to bring up the subject so people even think in terms of the type of conversation they're having. Not the results of the conversation they're having, but how to just change the conversation they're having.
You just said it, and I have to, because I was just waiting for you to take a break, and then you just said it though. I think counterintuitive, one of the most important counterintuitive things that a human being can see personally is to see that we always want a result, and that's almost always the wrong conversation. It's, and what do you mean? Like, well, what do you mean? I mean, I can't want things. I can't, no, it's not even about that so much. It's to be aware of the fact that you have this impulse and it will drive you places that you actually don't want to go. Like, in other words, too, to have a conversation with your partner, if it's an open-ended conversation in a way, if you're not trying to get something, that conversation is going to go so much better.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just going to go so... If you're just willing to be vulnerable, of course, is always such a big thing. And that's what that means, though. It's like you don't need something from it. You're just there. You're just there with the person. You're just there having that conversation. You're not trying to get to a point. That's a counterintuitive thing. It's a very deep urge. And that we're talking about relationships and stuff like that. But that's true, again...
It's politics. Think about politics.
Everything.
Every single political conversation you see has a goal in mind, which is to convince you of the ultimate correctness of the speaker, right?
Right.
That's what everyone's doing. This is right, this is wrong, this person's good, this person's bad, and everything they say is directed to only get to that point.
Yeah.
Right? And not to further a deeper conversation, right?
And so therefore it's not even a conversation.
Yeah, no.
It's the first one.
Propaganda.
You're talking to yourself, right? I mean, right,
it's
exactly.
It's a speech. It's not a conversation.
It's a speech, exactly. Which, by the way, tell me that you haven't done that in your relationship. You haven't seen other people do that in your... it's the same sort of impulse. We see it played out in the macro view of politics, but we do that. By the way, you can even do that internally. Right?
All the time.
I mean, talking to yourself.
Time.
Exactly. Yeah. You think you're debating something, but you're not. You're just telling yourself what you want to hear because you have a result that you want. Right?
Yes.
Which is usually that I'm right. I'm right.
Or the thing I wish was right is right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways.
Well,
I think that's a super important thing, counterintuitive. Yeah,
and that's why we say in the intro that in the wrong conversations, we ask the wrong questions, but we're also seeking out the wrong answers.
Yeah.
If you're focused only on the goal, you're going to miss the point. You're going to miss the value. Yeah.
Yes, the value, which is not totally encapsulated in some solid, perfect answer. And it never will be, right?
No.
I mean, it never will be.
What we're always trying to do with each other is to, if one of us is in a cloud, or if we're just even talking about it philosophically, we're trying to get to the next level.
Sure.
Right?
Expand that view, right? Expand it.
Yeah,
right? Definitely.
We often talk about it like as a ladder, right? Rungs of a ladder.
Yeah,
It's just,
that's
let's
one
just see if we can help each other get to the next step. And I think that, anyway, I just think that that's the game. And I think that encapsulates kind of what we're trying to do here, I think.
It does. Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. You know, it just all that makes me think of the super famous forest through the trees, right? I mean, you just can't see it when you're in there. You know, you just can't see it. But I think that again, it's one of those things that's useful as a coach, or you know, I mean, we keep talking about coaching, but a good friend or a good partner, right, that can help you see that. Because when you're there, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard sometimes for us to see our own thing that's right there in front of us, you know. And so, again, I think that's why there's something like to get it from your partner, right, David, is tricky business. Because there's so much baggage that comes. You have so many little things going on between the two of you. Yeah, exactly. So somebody more objective is probably tends to be more useful. But it's wonderful if you have a partner like that. I mean, I know my wife and I can do that for us to limited degrees. There's limits to it, I think, because of that, because of the relationship, right? Because of all the intricacies and all the, you know. But
I mean, I spent the last how many years coaching and being trained. When I'm in the middle of it, I don't see it. I don't care what tools I have.
That's why we call each other.
That's why I call you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right, exactly.
You're my first call when I need to when I need to see around the cloud. I just call you, and you have a great knack of hearing me out, and then just saying one thing that I don't even think you think is that profound, but I think you're just trying to tell me what you see, and then all of a sudden it just clicks for me because I see it through your eyes for a second, and you're objective, you're on the outside, and suddenly the conversation shifts, and then suddenly there's somewhere to go. It may not be, you know, maybe it's not a total answer, but it's somewhere to go, and I think that's the goal, right?
It is the goal.
Step forward in some way. Yeah.
Exactly. Step forward, step back, whatever exactly. I love that in a lot of times in the spirit. I think it's a Zen Buddhist thing. It's the backward step, they call it. Which is, if you think about that too, it's like stop going the same way. Stop. You know, that's the kind of modern way, right? You're going forward. You got to move forward. You got to accomplish more. You got to grow. Right? How about you take a backward step? You know, and that's all about taking a wider view, you know, and seeing something from a different place, not the constant.
That's the timeless metaphor. Well, step back for a minute. Let's all step.
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
all step back for a minute. What do they mean? They mean let's get out of this conversation and get to another level of conversation.
Yep, exactly.
One of the things, somebody who you introduced me to, who I ended up really enjoying, and I don't know how much you followed his work or whether you just heard something in what I said that reminded you of him, but the Dr. David Hawkins.
Oh yeah, no. Letting go, definitely. I would say it has had a huge part to play in a major shift in my life, spiritual shift.
Okay, so
I would say
he was essential.
That book primarily, but
one of the tools I have in coaching is kind of similar to something I think he came up with, or maybe not he came up with, but I think he started to put it in a sort of structure, which was like some sort of layers of perspective or layers of consciousness.
Layers of
I call it, in my thing, it was called energy. Like, what energy level are you in? Or some people call it state. What state are you in? And it's like just literally layers of perspective on whatever it is you're looking at. And the state that you're in almost determines the conversation you have. And so I know when I'm thinking in my own life, trying to solve a problem, or when I'm working with somebody on solving theirs, I think, okay, can I identify the conversation they're in, or the feeling that's
Yes.
causing it, and then change the feeling so that the conversation naturally just follows the feeling, right? So if somebody's in fear, it's a lot different if somebody's in empathy, or if somebody's in anger, or if somebody's in opportunity, right? It's all these different things. There's a great quote. I'm gonna butcher it though, but it's something that like that anger is the mask of vulnerability, I think. And I don't even know who said it, but I just remember that, like...
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard that.
Recently I saw it, and I don't even know who to attribute it to, but you don't see that until you're actually even above anger. Until you're having a conversation that's above your own anger. Then you can see that the anger was actually just a response to fear. But you can't... When you're angry, that's not what you're doing. You're busy collecting ammunition to defeat your adversary, right? That's what you're doing.
Exactly. And you're very focused. That's some of the good parts of anger, right? It can actually, it's got a decent amount of energy to it, and it can really get you focused. Yeah. Now, it doesn't always lead to the best places, but I mean, those are some of the... That's why sometimes if somebody's in apathy, getting them to get angry a little bit, like, are you sick of this yet? That kind of thing. I am sick of it. And all of a sudden their energy will shift enough to do something.
Yeah, there's more energy. There's more energy in anger than apathy, which means the conversation has more energy, which means it can go more places.
Exactly.
Right? And then above that.
Exactly. That's what Hawkins' thing was all about. The number was like a frequency almost, like what frequency it was vibrating, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm wrong, but so the higher they go, the more energy there is behind it, actually. In other words, you start to see the value in acceptance, you start to see the value in silence, these things that don't seem in the state of anger don't feel like there's any place for it, right? It doesn't even make any sense at that point. But anyways, the energy level, meaning the vibration level, I thought was a very interesting thing that he mapped out for you too. And he helps you see how somebody vibrating, if you want to put it that way, at a higher level can help somebody because they have more, you could say tools even in a way, right? They can see more, they have more energy to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you can only remain angry, especially certain levels of anger, for so long, right? I mean, you get pooped out of that thing. Yeah. And then you got to do something.
Yeah, it burns a lot of energy, and it burns it dirty.
It's sucking you. It burns it dirty, exactly. Yeah,
well, it's hyper. Anger is hyper focused, right? It has a purpose. Its purpose is to drill a hole in something, right? I mean, that's what its purpose is. Exactly. So it's hyper focused, but focus by definition is a limitation of perspective. So you trade power for perspective.
That's true.
Because you can tie this in at these levels of energy, these levels of consciousness, are you can just think of them as levels of conversation, right? So the wrong conversation that's not getting you anywhere might be somewhere around anger or apathy or something. It could even be something great like empathy. You could have an empathy problem. A lot of people have empathy problems.
Absolutely. I've had a lot. I've definitely helped people with that a lot.
Even though empathy is a decently high lens to be looking through, right? But it can still cause you problems. So you got to go one above that. But the point is that there's always another level. There's always another layer. And if you and what the intro of the show says is, if you're stuck somewhere and you're not getting somewhere, stop debating between the things that are in front of you. Like, none of them may be the answer. Like, you literally just change the conversation. Yeah.
It's worth taking a look, right? It's worth trying to step back and say, what am I missing? Because there always is something, right? That's Heisenberg. Like, you can only focus so much on something, and the more you do that, the more you're missing something else. I mean, it's just the nature of it, right? So it's always useful. I think that's the whole point of this show, hopefully, is that we can do that together for each other, for ourselves, and then hopefully inspire other people to do that too.
Yeah. The point of the show isn't for us to be like, hey, this is the wrong conversation. We're going to show you the right conversation. Thank you very much. Right. We are way deeper than you, and we're proud of it. Yes. No, it's a call to examine the conversation. It's a call to raise the conversation, It's
Yes.
and
Yes.
and not just because a better conversation will lead you to more options and potentially a better answer, but because there is no answer, right? This is something that right. The answer is always a moving target. So what you don't need answers. You need a process for finding answers.
Yes. Right.
And so the quality of your life becomes the quality of your process.
Right.
Right? And there's a quote, I think, I don't know, maybe you shared it with me. It reminds me of something that I know we've talked about it, but I think I remember it because you told me, which is that the famous quote about the man never steps in the same river twice.
Oh, God, yeah, sure, exactly.
Right? So, a man never steps in the same river twice because it is not the same river, and he is not the same man.
It's not the same man. Exactly.
And that's life.
No, I love that. Then that's life,
right?
baby.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So that's why the show's not called The Wrong Answer. Right? Or we provide you with the right answer, because who knows? It's changing. It's different than it was when I first brought it up a minute ago. Right? So...
Yeah, that's I remember when we first talked about this, the name and maybe talking about this and all that stuff. One of the first things, and I think I did say this, so this has already been hashed a little bit, but was the fact that if you're having the same conversation over and over and over and over again, it's almost certainly a sign that it's the wrong conversation because life is changing, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the quote you just said. I mean, you're not the same. Your partner's not the same. Your coworker's not the same. They might look like they are, but it's best and it behooves us to kind of try to step out and say, what am I missing? What is different? Or what am I not focusing on? You know what I mean? It's
life can move on from that story. Life can have moved on for decades, and you're still telling that story. Right?
Yes. Oh, we all know those people. I think everybody knows.
We are those people, right?
That's even truer. Yeah.
Regardless of how deep you go, somewhere in you is that's happening, and right. Like there's no perfect solution. There's no perfect escape from that. But you can always make progress. But that's. And like we said in coaching, a lot of times you're just trying to change the conversation, right? So to get them into a more helpful conversation. But a lot of that is just literally breaking a conversational habit that someone has, right? Because you get into a circular firing squad of your own thoughts, and then it goes and goes on forever, and then you need someone to kind of pluck you out of that circular firing squad. Yeah.
It's what I always love to call the rut. You're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you got a rut there. And it's interesting that metaphor works so well because, when you have that rut and you even try to get out, it has sort of an inertia, right? It wants to suck you back into the rut. I mean, it's just...
I'm gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it.
And then, exactly, right? I mean, that rut is so... And then whether it's an internal rut, like the inner conversations, whether it's a relational rut, whether it's a job rut, like your occupation or whatever, we all have those, which is the same thing. It's just another way of talking about habits, I think, in a certain way. I mean...
I do like that metaphor because in a rut, like I think about, because I grew up near where you grew up, where you are, mm-hmm. I was up in the Rust Belt, I was up in the Great Lakes, and you get caught in the snow, and then your car is trying to get out of the rut that it's in,
yes.
And you almost make it, and you think, if I just do this again and again and again, one of those times I'm going to get lucky, right? Because the other answer is getting out of the car and finding a bit more of a difficult or complicated solution. Or maybe it's not even more difficult and complicated, but it's unknown. It's an unknown solution. And facing
it's warm in the car.
It's warm in the car, and it's simple to just keep trying. And it's the same in conversation. It's simple to keep having the same conversation, even if that conversation is destroying you or wasting your energy and wasting your life. It's so easy to just keep repeating it because you've developed a habit. And there might be a far easier solution that's far less painful, but it's unknown to you.
Yeah.
And people don't
you just stumbled on something that's really... No, right, exactly.
People don't like that unknown thing because you don't know it's going to work out for you. And I think that's... The next level conversation is always an unknown conversation. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know if you're talking to your wife or your spouse or your husband, whatever. You don't know where that's going to... If you say that thing... You don't know what's going to happen next. If you complain about the thing you complained about 10 times already,
Yeah.
then you can keep
You
bludgeoning
know their
with them.
response, and you're going to walk away feeling right. Right?
Or it's like trying to get out of the snow rut. One of these times, if I just
Sure.
keep hitting this, it's gonna fix
Right.
itself, or she's gonna do the work to fix this.
She's going to see that I'm right.
Yeah. Or I'm just gonna catch
Or
enough
he's-
traction to like pull out of this.
Sure.
Instead of saying, well, maybe we ought to just maybe we're not even talking about the right thing anymore. But as soon as you go there, you have no idea where you are anymore.
The same conversation is the wrong conversation. That's all there is to it, Except that I suppose the one caveat, because of course I always like to be as clear, and I know we both kind of struggle with this because we like clarity almost too much, right? But is the fact that there are big questions. I remember I did a talk about that once. I did a YouTube video on that. There's some of these big, what's the meaning of life, sort of questions that are worth returning to over and over again. But that's because there are no answers. You're not, if you're doing this right, so to speak, you're not even looking for that, right? You're opening yourself to the backward step to see what am I missing, to, the value of
Those questions are eternal. Those are like anchors. Those eternal questions are things that you can use to pull yourself out of the lower level conversation you're in. What is love? What does loving someone need? And then you might remember, loving is an action, not a thing. And then it just suddenly it takes you out of the fight a little bit, and you start, right? So it's like an anchor. It's like an anchor, but an anchor that's above you instead of below you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, exactly. I think that's the purpose of these questions. I mean, the big ones. That was the point, right? I mean, that they, one of the things that I immediately started to think about, and I know you and I have talked about this, and I've shared this with people, especially people I've worked with and stuff. And sometimes I feel like you'll get the, oh God, don't tell me that kind of response. But you and I have both done our own deep searching, inner work. Still doing it, and the deeper I go, the more I do it, the more I realize there seems to be no end to it. Now, at this level of the game, that's a beautiful thing to me, but that's the reason that these big questions can always pay dividends, because they're just, when it comes to depth, there's no end, right? Whether it's outer or inner, it's like, I think that's a beautiful, because there's no, just to make sure I don't turn it pessimistically, there's no end to beauty, there's no end to love, there's no end to peace, actually. Like you can relax, and then you can relax some more. It's like, and you can relax even more. It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever had those experiences, right, when you're really letting go.
One of the conversations that happens a lot in the world is, do the ends justify the means? Right? And then along the lines of what you're saying, the more I thought about it, the more I realized, well, there are no ends. Right? The ends never arrive. Yeah. So all you're left with are the means. Right? Right?
Amen, brother.
So,
yes,
so work on the means, the end is fine. Have an end in sight. It's always good to have a goal, but
don't expect too much from it. That's right. It's not going to solve all your problems. When you get the job that you're looking for, when you start that business you've always wanted to, when you find the person you're meant to marry, they're wonderful things, but they're not the end. Right? And so there's going to be more. What I want to express here, because I think it's going to be important as we go forth in more conversations, is that there is more work involved, especially initially, right? To go to the next level of perception, if you will, to be able to step up to that next rung on the ladder does take work. But once you've done that work, life actually becomes easier.
Yes.
Which is another counterintuitive thing, right?
Yes.
Like your relationship will, if you can actually do that work to help it shift, then you can solve that. I don't like that at all, but you know what I mean? Like you can move on from that same rut and get out of that rut. You're going to find that doesn't drain your energy anymore, right? In that relationship or in that job or whatever. So all of a sudden there's more energy freed up to enjoy, to do other things, to move forward, to have other conversations, right? I mean, that are more interesting instead of the same ones over and over and over again. I think that's an important thing. I mean, it does take more energy, but in the long run, there's value in going.
In the long run, it doesn't. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So what do you want to invest in? Like you can invest in oh yeah, do you want to invest in the next year? Do you want to invest in the next minute, right? And
Yeah. I love that Anthony Robbins quote, right? People overestimate what they can accomplish in a year or something like that, and they underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. Are you in for the long haul here, And life is the
Yes.
long haul. I mean, where are you going? We all know how that ends, right? So, let's live not for the second of, this instant gratification thing, right? I mean, anyways.
I was on a coaching call yesterday, and the person I was talking to was facing just a lot. Just a lot was being dumped in their lap, and the line came up, "I don't have the energy to face this." And I said, "Yes, you're right. You don't. Yeah, you don't. There's no way. Because first of all, you're trying to solve the whole thing, right? Yeah. All at once. That's part one. And right now you are completely in a state of overwhelm. And therefore, you don't have much energy to work with. It's true. You are totally outclassed by your situation. But as you bite off what you can chew, the situation will slowly shrink, but you will gain energy. And as you gain energy, the problem becomes smaller just by the fact that you are bigger in the face of it, because it's all relative. And that's just another way of saying what you were saying, is as you elevate the conversation, you become far more efficient at moving through the conversation. Or addressing what's in front of you.
Yeah. Here's another counterintuitive. Exactly. And here's another counterintuitive thing, again, that I think we all know, but we don't like to face. But it's important to face. I mean, you couldn't say this to somebody that sounds like what that person was going through. Sounds like some serious stuff, which, to be overwhelmed is totally appropriate, right, David? I mean, if something's been dumped on you, I don't know what it was, but I mean, it's totally appropriate to be overwhelmed at that moment, right? But one of the counterintuitive things in life is that we all want to be happy. We all want to experience pleasure. We all want to, have all these only good things in our life, right? But quite often, the worst times in our life are the times that we gain the most in a certain way. Yeah. Like we grow the most. It's so. This is one of the reasons is especially if we can do it in a relatively healthy way, right? We get what I would call, we get in touch with our authentic power, right? Like we get in touch with the fact that we can get through this, which at that moment you feel like you can't. You know what I mean? You get in touch with something deeper because you're forced to go there. And a lot of times we'll just avoid that. It's another one of those counterintuitive things, though, that all the bad is not so bad sometimes.
Well, but what you're saying is what happened. What was funny is that so the conversation starts, I'm completely overwhelmed and anxious and just lost, right? To which I say, of course you are. And they say, well, I can't see a way forward. And I say, well, of course you can't. Because you're overwhelmed. Because I mean, in that state, what do you see? But eventually the conversation got around to this person remembering when they had been in this state before, and remembering it was actually one of the best things that ever happened to them, because it forced them to face certain things, because it forced a certain conversation that they didn't want to have, or that they were avoiding, or that they didn't even know was available. Maybe they weren't avoiding it, maybe they just didn't even know it was available. And that they remembering back to how those tough times are what made their life the best. And then suddenly they're out of the current tragedy, because now they're seeing the long arc of the story, for even if it's just for a moment. They didn't solve their issue,
exactly,
but they realize that their issue, that all things must pass, to quote George Harrison, right? So that this too shall pass, or you shall not pass. That's Gandalf. That doesn't apply. That's Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I was just thinking about all the shall pass quotes, but it was just so good that they could see that, okay, there is a longer arc to this story than what I can see right now. I remember what that feels like.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? I can take the next step. And to me, that wasn't me solving their life issue. I didn't solve their issue. I didn't coach their problem. I coached them, right? So I, and it wasn't even, I mean, I
Yeah,
didn't even
right.
lead them there. They led themselves there. I just literally gave them a space so that they could walk
course.
there. So I don't want to pretend like I'm taking credit for that, but it's
Sure.
because the credit's theirs, and they just realized it because I facilitated another level of conversation, which is exactly what we're trying to do here,
That's
which
it,
is why the whole
exactly.
thing is called, the wrong conversation. And the whole idea is that if you're stuck somewhere,
Right.
maybe you're having the wrong conversation.
How would we bring this home, David? How could we? I mean, I think we have many times, but maybe to kind of reiterate so. Yeah, so I'm curious what you would have to say about that.
I think that well, we said something earlier that I just want to reiterate, that we keep talking about these levels of perspective and these levels of the conversation, and that if you can get a wider, bigger view, like move toward the spiritual, move toward being a Zen master over sometimes the wrong conversation is wrong because it's too deep.
Yeah,
Right?
Interesting. Yeah,
So I have this. So this is something
That's great.
that I'm so
Yeah.
thankful for my wife for. So I'll feel something. I'll notice there's some tension. There's something that's not going ideally, and I'll be like, and I'll philosophize it. I'll come up with some grand narrative of why this needs to shift, and she'll be like, oh, well, if we just go to bed 30 minutes earlier, we could do that in the morning, and then we don't have to worry about it. Right? She'll just completely lay out the most simple, practical solution that does just solve the problem that I've turned it into, like,
sure.
does God exist and what does it all mean? And she'll be like, well, if we just do this instead of that, it's over. It's just solved. And so
Right.
that the wrong conversation isn't always because it's too low of a conversation.
Yeah.
It's just, you might be overthinking it.
Well, it kind of reminds me of Occam's razor, right? Like the simplest answer tends to be the right one. Like, look for that sometimes too. I mean, we got to be careful not to oversimplify too, but I think that there's a lot of truth in that. Does that make any sense?
That's an Einstein quote
Yeah.
as well. Like, you need the
Yeah.
answer to be as simple as possible, but not too simple. Or
Right.
something.
That
That's
is
a
right. That is
paraphrase.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know that quote. Yeah. I think
But
it's
that's-
important. I think that's and it does give you some parameters too. You know what I mean? As you're trying to decipher, is this the wrong conversation, sort of thing. Like to keep in mind that we're looking for simple, but not oversimplifying, right? I mean, there's some sort of I think it's what the Buddhists would call the middle path, right? I think that's a common thing.
Or the third way. Yeah.
Or the third way. That
Middle
reminds
path,
me.
The third way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. That reminds me when you said that, and I don't know if it's pertinent right now because it's almost rehashing, but it reminded me of Ken Wilber, who is really big, into either or thinking, like, in other words, pointing out non-dual thinking. And so he actually has a million things he talks about, and when he talks about that, like the other way, it's both, meaning what you always talk about, like, what's the right answer? Well, it's both things, obviously, right? Like, especially politics, right? Who's right? The conservative or well, they're both right in a certain way.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
both
there's just
wrong.
apps, and they're both wrong, right? Exactly. Exactly. So, but his thing was, it's both, and there's both, and there's even more. There's even things that aren't being considered. There's even, you know what I mean? So
I follow a very simple rule. If I'm stuck in either or thinking,
yeah,
if I want to change the conversation I'm having, I'll say, okay,
Yeah.
it's not either or, it's both.
yep,
It's more,
it's more,
and it's different.
Yeah.
It's both, it's more, and it's different. Right? So it's both of those. It's a little more than that, and it's something completely unrelated you haven't even thought about yet. And just by saying that to myself, it's both, it's more, it's different, suddenly encapsulates the problem and makes me look at it from the outside. It lifts you out of the cloud a little bit, just to realize that from in there you can't see it. If you're in it, you can't see it.
Yeah.
Right?
One more time. Say it again. It's what? What do you say to yourself?
It's both, it's more, it's different.
It's different. That's like your trigger. You say that to yourself, and it kind of triggers you to take a different response, right? In a way, like,
Yeah, well, it just helps me kind of, like, if I notice I'm just doing this,
yeah,
right? Right? If I'm just doing
Sure.
that, like, okay, first of all, it's not this or this. It's both, right? It's some balance of maybe, well, part of it is that it's some balance of these things, and that the balance is always changing because what we said about it's never the same river, and you're never the same man stepping into the river, right? So the first of all, the target's always moving, so you're not going to find an answer that you can stick to. So give up, not give up on the search, but give up on the expectation of an answer.
Right.
So it's both, and that there's some balance, and it's more. There's more going on here than you're taking into account. And not only is it more, but there's something that you don't even think is related probably at play.
Yeah. I think this great relationship advice, I like advice, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, all relationships could benefit greatly from that. Those three, just keeping those in mind when you're having a problem.
It's just a way to get out. It's just a way to get out of the...
Step out of yourself a little
It's a
bit.
good way to change the conversation. Well, how is it both?
Exactly.
Oh, that's a whole different conversation. How is it my view... Like, you're arguing with your wife, right? She's saying you're this, you're saying she's that. And how about you just start with, okay, it's both. I am that, and you're that. And it's more. We're more than that. And it's completely different than what we just said.
Right.
Right?
It's very humbling.
Totally.
It's very humbling. Yeah, I love it.
Humble is a good posture to adopt whenever you can, right? Because
I agree.
Because you can't learn. If you think you already know, you can't learn. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. If your hands are already full, you can't put anything new in there, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I think that was a great way to end on that, honestly, if you want my opinion.
I think if people, I think that we have articulated at least what we think we mean by the wrong conversation, and the value of not the right conversation, but a better conversation, or at least a different conversation to throw a monkey wrench in and get something new, right? If you're stuck, the goal is to progress, right? Progress is the point.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would invite people to say what they think. I mean, in other words, leave a comment on, was this an interesting conversation? Would you consider it the wrong conversation?
What did we get wrong in this conversation?
What did we get wrong in this conversation, right? What did we get right? What inspired you? I mean, that would be great to hear people.
Yeah, or what about where you've recognized that a problem wasn't getting solved because you're in the wrong conversation?
Yeah.
Like
we all learn great from example, right? I mean, we do.
And we love to see the comments about that stuff, because it helps us know what to bring up, what to talk about, and
Absolutely.
and what people are facing out there. And because my guess is we're all dealing with some version of the same stuff, right? So,
of course we are. Yeah.
So help us direct the conversation by sharing your thoughts. And
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Appreciate that in advance. So.
And so then, so you can join us back each week. We're going to do one of these every week. And on the next one, we're going to talk about how you are not a good person.
Can't wait for that one.
Yes,
I know you're not talking about me, obviously. But
yeah, I am talking. No, this isn't to the audience. This is to you.
Shoot.
This is about Adrien is not a good person.
Excellent. I can't wait. I'm open to this conversation. I want you to know.
And you can tell me why I'm not a good person, and then we can team up on everyone else in the world who decides to go through the torture of watching that episode of why they are not a good person.
It sounds exciting. I can't wait for it, David.
All right. We'll see you back then.
It's been fun.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care.